Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Kitchen time. This effectively is a continuation of the other video, but I needed to separate it. So I'm potting up two of our Project Orchids, so this video can be kept separately. The first one I'm doing is the Epidendrum, which has had a bit of a clean up. Not too much actually, I didn't take too many of the roots off. I could do with taking a few more off. Well, that'll just pull off. So I missed a couple of obvious ones. But it's not that important to get every single one off. What I'm more interested in is the fact that I've kept a good root system. That's the important bit. Right, so this is effectively, these are often found growing in the ground, so they are, as near as damn it, terrestrials. Whether they're actually full terrestrials or not, I don't know. And at the moment, I'm not bothered. I've seen them growing in the ground, almost like a bush. And if they're capable of growing in the ground, they won't mind a fine media. I'm putting some chunky stuff in the bottom because I don't want to block the air cone. I still want to get some air in round the base. And it's going in effectively my finest mix, which is small bark, and it's going to get some sphagnum in there. Not too much, but an amount. I wouldn't say it's going to be half and half, more like 2/3 and 1/3. I still want some air around these roots, but I need a tight media so that it really gets a hold of those roots. Sort of the same sort of thing as I'd probably do with the Zygopetalum, I suppose. And bearing in mind, I haven't owned one of these for a very long time, and this is the first time this one's been repotted. So we're sort of winging it, really, you could say. Although I have seen others repot these, and most tend to go for a very small, medium, not large, chunky stuff. So we'll see what we can do with that. Now this plant needs to sit relatively high in the pot. It has a natural tendency to grow upwards, leaving the roots in what would be the ground, producing aerial roots which then progress downwards into whatever it's growing in. But they do start higher up. And because of the nature of the plant, I don't want air gaps. The way to not get air gaps is to only put a little bit of media in at a time. Don't put loads in, because that's how you'll get an air gap. See, I've got a lot of roots in this area. The only way to get down in between them is to go a little bit at a time, flick it in towards the centre. That's where you'll get your air pocket if you're going to get one. And just wiggle it all in, and keep your eye on the outside of the pot, which only works if you've got a clear pot, obviously. And just keep your eye on it, make sure. See, that horrible clip was the end of that root breaking off. I've lost it, it's gone. No, I've got it. Gone down in the pot. But luckily it's a branching root system. It's not the end of the world, and it's an extensive root system. I'm not fussed. This would take off with half this number of roots. It's not essential. But I do want it packed in tight. This is if it's a ground growing orchid, it's going to be in tight. You know, the ground would naturally be that way. It would be constantly compacted by rain, and you know, so we'll try and replicate that by packing it in nice and firm. And with any luck, that'll hold it upright without having to stake it as well, which is my theory. Have we got any air pockets? No. No goody. Yeah, that's stable already, and I haven't even finished packing yet. That's good. You will still be able to see quite a few of these roots. When I've finished, there will still be some showing. That's how it was, and all the plants that were in the section where I bought this from were like that. They were all potted in that manner. Bearing in mind it came from a nursery, they probably know what they're doing. That's my theory. I wouldn't guarantee that all nurseries know what they're doing. You look at some of the way they're potted nowadays. I'm not going to put much more media in than that. I'm going to leave that quite airy near the top. As I said, the aerial roots will progress downwards naturally. I think that'll do. Yeah, that is 2 plants, I can tell now. This bit over here moves and the other bit doesn't, so it is actually 2 plants. And this bit is not firm. The other bit is. So we definitely had 2 plants. Cheeky monkeys! That'll do. That's that one done then. And that is Epidendrum, Comet Valley, Orange Star. I was told by somebody else because I think the tag said Orchid. Right, I'm going to have a short break because the next one's a bit different, shall we say. Okay, so now we'll have a go at the Bulbophyllum Wilbur Chang. Quite an extensive root system. I didn't manage to get all the media out, but it's clean enough to be potted up the way it's going to be potted. It's an extensive root system actually, it's not bad at all. And there are areas of new root growth on this, so it should pick up quite quickly. Non-bloomer that one is. And I'm going to have a go at using one of these new pots I got on a slow boat from China. These are a couple of quid from China, and if you buy 3 you get a discount and free postage from China to the UK. I'm impressed. But they're incredibly sturdy. There's plenty of room to put hangers on if you chose to do so. Not in this case. But because the gaps are quite large, if you were potting something like a Cattleya in there and you were only going to use large bark, you wouldn't need to do anything. But because I'm going to use a fine media, it'll fall out the holes. So what I'm actually going to do is line it like you would sort of a hanging basket, or attempt to. So I'm going to try and put a liner of sphagnum around the outside and across the bottom to hold the media. There's a thorn in there, you little tyke. Yeah, go steady with this moss, there are thorns in there sometimes. We actually analysed a large section of thorn which I took out of my hand in a video a while back, and turns out it's gorse. Where this is grown, gorse is quite common, shall we say, and obviously some gets in the moss, so take care, especially if you've got sensitive little hands. My old gnarly ones don't take much notice. But there is something to be said to having tough old skin. It doesn't get damaged so easy. Now I won't be able to stack this right up to the top, but once I get some media and the plant in there, I can always put a bit more around the top. But the most important bit really is to get some across the bottom and round the base, so that it'll at least hold the media and, you know, get the sort of potting mechanism going. So that's most of the sides done. It does seem to want to stay there. It'll probably all get knocked down trying to get the plant in, and I'm going to need some more moss. This is used up a lot. I don't need a huge amount on the base. The roots will tangle all this up and set this in place. As I say, I just don't want all the media falling straight through the holes as I put it in. Right, so we've got a nice lining in there. This is a relatively shallow rooting type plant, so it doesn't need a deep pot by any means. And in addition to that, a fair few of the newer root areas are near the edge, so they've got something nice and moist to get into. Right, let's get a bit more moss. So I want to mix some moss up with the media too. And it's quite a large tray, it's going to have quite a bit of media, but then it is quite a large plant as well, so we'll just get some more into soak. It works better if it's been pre-soaked, otherwise it just stays too dry. It can make life difficult trying to wet it if you use it dry in your pot, because your bark's dry, or it is when I pot. I always use dry media if I can when I'm potting, but I always make sure the moss is pre-soaked. Even though I may squeeze a lot of the water out, I still make sure it's pre-soaked. Right. So That's nowhere near enough. I'll need to go and get some more media. I'll be back. Bad planning on my part. Now with this, I'm going to mix moss in with it, and although that looks about, well actually it looks like more than I need, don't forget it's going to get pressed down. You know, when it's loose, it can look volume wise a lot more than it actually is once you start pressing it down in your pot. And if I mix up too much, the fact that I never use this small bark without moss, it doesn't matter, it can go back in the bag. You know, I don't waste it just because it's got moss in it. It'll dry off very quickly. My bags of media stay out in the hall. I used to keep them in the shed, but there's, you know, I had a bag went mouldy on me in the shed because it's damp and cold out there. So I keep them in the warm and dry, and that stops them getting any damp in the bag and possibly getting some mould starting out. Right. There we go. Shall we put a bit more in? It is a Bulbophyllum, they do like to stay moist. The small bark does stay moist an awful lot longer than the medium and the large bark, yes, but when it's new it can still dry pretty quick, and the moss will stop that happening as quick. I'm just wondering, first time I water this tray, is it going to wash all the moss out the bottom of the pot? We shall see. It's an experiment. As I say, I haven't used these trays before. Right, let's get some in. Push it slightly up the side so that I've got a little well. Now the fun begins. Let's see if we can get this to sit in there nicely. I've got a couple of bits that are going to dangle. Can't help that. And I want it sitting quite high when I've finished, which I'll show you a trick for that sort of thing. But it's a very, very fine root system that's quite extensive. So this would be incredibly easy to leave air gaps. So again, a very small amount at a time. And some media will have to get pushed into the centre of the plant because there's like a hollow. This is the bit where I want to get some nice new media. There's 5 new growths in succession there, and some of them have new roots starting. So that's the bit that I want the new media for. And room for more to grow, he says confidently. Yeah, this is the bit with the worst hollow. Tuck some in there nicely. How are we doing? Have we gone all the way round yet? There's a little bit there that hasn't had any yet. I'm trying to push it in under the plant without disturbing the moss up the sides of the tray, but it's not happening, it's all getting squashed in together. Right, as far as the plant is concerned, there's enough media, so I can just see a few gaps, which I just want to get some in. Doesn't need pressing down. As I said, when it's watered, the water will pull it down, gradually settle it into all the little crevices. And I don't want the pseudobulbs actually sunk into the media. Bulbophyllums tend to naturally grow virtually along the surface. They don't tend to bury themselves, they sit on the media, not get into it to any extent really. Okay, I think that is it. Now again, what I'm going to do is soak a bit more moss and put a bit more around the top of the pot, because I know what's going to happen. As soon as I try and water that, it's going to wash that media out of those slots near the top of the pot, and I'll end up with half of it on the floor. So I'll try and get a bit more around the surface of the top of the pot, just as like an extra bit of liner really. That's all it's for. Help hold the media in place. it hasn't gone in too bad. I think I'm going to like these trays. They're certainly not bought specifically for Bulbophyllums. There's lots of types of orchids I can use these for. And I do have a couple of Cattleyas that are recent acquisitions that came in normal pots that I was thinking of either mounting or trying them out in here. So we'll see how we go with those. They're not in a position to repot yet. There's no sign of a new root system, and one of them's a bifoliate, and they are very fussy about being repotted. Why, I don't know. I'd have thought a Cattleya's a Cattleya, but not so. The bifoliates, if you don't get that timing right, you can lose your root system far easier than you can on the single-leaved pseudo bulbs. They seem to take to repotting a bit better. Right, I think that'll do. As I say, I can see a few exposed roots that can have a little bit of moss around them. Give them something to get into. And there's another bit there as well. Actually, you can have some media, as I've got somewhere to put it now. And then a bit of moss on top. So it's quite a large area of exposed roots there. So there we go, the bulbs are just about sitting on the top. The base of the bulbs is slightly in the media, not a lot. If you bury them too deep, especially if you've just disturbed your root system, you may well get some rotting. Especially like now, it's cooler temperatures. I'm in my winter time at the moment. I know this is going to seem odd, but where this bulb here is tipped over, I'm actually going to put some large bark under that to hold it upright, but not get it wet. You see what I mean? See, it's sat upright now. Right, that is it. Bulbophyllum, Wilbur Chang, and as yet a non-bloomer. Now come on, get your flipping act together. I can't wait for this to bloom, because effectively, if it does, it's a sequential bloomer. It's one of those that I think it produces a single bloom at a time, but when that bloom drops, the spike extends and produces more, a bit like a psychopsis, that sort of thing. But, got to get it to bloom in the first place. Who knows, that disturbance may just kick it off. It might kill it off as well. No, I think that's got a plenty good enough root system to get going now. So there we go. I expect it looks a bit tatty on the outside, and yeah, this can all poke back in as and when, but because these bits will just go dry. Yeah, I'm quite pleased with that. That's gone in quite nicely. So that's the second of our project plants. I think that's 3 of the project orchids that have now been repotted. They're not all due a repot by any means, but this one I wanted to get going because the next thing that's going to happen with this plant is new growths. It would be nice to get some blooms, but I'm not anticipating that, but I am anticipating its new season's growths very soon, and I wanted them to get straight into something new and somewhere where it can be accommodated. So there we go, that's those 2 done. And this is certainly a bit different. Yeah, I think the smaller version of these would lend themselves very nice to just being filled up with chunky bark and have a Cattleya sat in them. And they've got a lovely flat base to them, unlike some of the holy clay pots which can get very top heavy. I think these will work quite well. God, these leaves are dusty. Laziness. Anyway, that's that one done. Hope you've enjoyed those 2, and they'll go into, that's a normal video effectively, but it will get put into the playlist Project Orchids, because those 2 were Project Orchids. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.